Hello, I'm Natalie Tardy, and I'm going to be doing my speech on sex trafficking and how it's an issue in society today. And the title of my speech is Human Training, Not Trafficking. That's the preface of what we'll be going over. After I give my speech, you'll be more aware of how prevalent and common in society sex trafficking is. In fact, it is the fastest growing crime industry, as this point here says. It's the fastest growing crime industry, and it's growing at an unprecedented rate. And here it says it affects women, men, and both adults and children. So it's a wide spectrum of victims that it affects, and that's a source by DeStefano, 2007. And another fact, 12.3 million people in the world are victims of trafficking, and 98% of sex slaves are females, and that's a source by Smith here. And trafficking is most common in poor countries, and therefore is common for women in those countries since they're more vulnerable and unstable in order to get jobs than men are, because they're usually the last pick for jobs. And a source by Roth says feminization of poverty and discriminatory practices in the labor market increase the vulnerability of women to fall victim of human trafficking. And so with that, basically once they're in the sex trafficking and human trafficking business, it's nearly impossible to get out for many reasons. And despite efforts in general in nations to stop sex trafficking and to at least reduce it or start war on it, it has only increased trafficking in forms, in transportation, and in many ways. So therefore, in order to conquer this global monster of sex trafficking, every nation and everyone on board needs to be patient and determined in order to accomplish that big task. Basically, the prominence of sex trafficking needs to come to a screeching halt. There are many strategies and ways to go about it that people have thought of, but one of the most effective is found in Europe. It's a three-part strategy called the 3P strategy. Kind of a tongue twister. But 3P strategy, as we are here, says a three-pronged approach: prevention of trafficking, protection of victims, and prosecution of perpetrators. So 3Ps, easy to remember: prevention, protection, and persecution. So in order to prevent this, the society and wherever someone is using this program, they must be all in. You can't be half in, half wanting it. You have to be fully committed. And for protecting the victims, they're almost like sheep and we're their shepherds. So we need to be gentle and just protect them and watch over them and support them as if they're vulnerable sheep, which in a sense they are vulnerable and we are their shepherds. And in order for persecution to work, we must have consequences harsh enough for the traffickers to think it's worth to maybe consider not doing trafficking. As of right now, there was only 5 trafficking cases that were brought to trial until 2010. Only 3 of those led to convictions. So unless the consequences and punishments for criminals get harsher, it's not worth the risk of stopping due to the immense profit that traffickers have in this business. Another 3-part strategy that will help is more victim aimed and centered. It's more in depth with the victims. It's called the 3R strategy, right here. And so it stands for rescue, rehabilitation, and reintegration. So in order for women to be rescued, it's easier if people know. So we can do that through awareness programs, and that can easily be done in schools, on commercials, anything. Awareness programs are easy for any nation. And once the women do get rescued, it's hard for them to get rehabilitated or reintegrated into society because they often feel socially marginalized, keeping their sex work secret from friends, family, and potential employers for fear of rejection. So due to that, we should just welcome them with open arms and be in full support of them when and if they do get rescued. And through these programs, nations will be able to get a grasp on how vast the numbers are and how wide the network of sex trafficking is. Since it's an underground crime industry, it's hard to get any estimation on numbers. So in order for any of these 3-part strategies or organizations or programs to work, societies must fully understand what the trafficking victims goes through, what they experience, how they get involved in sex trafficking, and why it is so difficult for them to get out. One reason it's hard for women or men, whoever's in sex trafficking, to escape from this is because there's a false sense of security, at least economically, that they feel. Underdeveloped countries with a weak economy, as we see here, where trafficking is rooted in underdeveloped countries, so they need to get income, and this is a source of income as shaky as the job is. So once they get past the pain and the heartache and all that comes with the hardship of being sex trafficked or sex slave, then it's worth it because you've already gotten past the worst part in order to get some sense of security or income. And as I said before, poor countries are most vulnerable, so it's hardest to get data on them. And right here it says, statistics on traffic victims are difficult to obtain due to the inherently underground nature of trafficking, inability to get info from traffickers, and vulnerability of traffic victims, and that's a source by Roca. So that just goes to show that it's very, very hard due to the underground nature to get any estimate, and that's just what it is, an estimate on trafficking. Another force that complicates freedoms is past traumatic events. And many victims have prior histories of violence and sexual abuse, which further complicates the counter-trafficking efforts, and that's what Smith outlines here in this last point. So even if the traffickers don't go through prior abuse or any trauma, they will have lasting pain and heartache either way after being trafficked. And they also feel shame when they return home after, as I said, due to their involvement in a demeaning industry and a taboo topic. So it's hard to get reintegrated into society when kind of shaming once people know what you used to do. And another big reason is overpowering and manipulative bosses involved in sex slavery is one of the main indicators that women are trapped and they have no way out. Because trafficker bosses know exactly what to do to keep women. They know if a certain woman needs to be abused physically, if one needs to be brainwashed, if one needs to have mental games on, they know exactly what they need to do to keep them. They'll threaten themselves and their families if they leave, so they feel like they're trapped. And DeStefano really proves this point when he says here, rape, intimidation, and violence are commonly employed by traffickers to control their victims and prevent them from speaking out. So that just proves that. And despite anti-trafficking organizations or movements, there are still opponents to criminalizing sex trafficking, and they think legalizing would be a better solution. So instead of criminalizing, they want to legalize it, and they argue that criminalization doesn't end the sex work, it only puts a blanket on it and it hides it from the public, and it also, they think it increases the risk and danger of the trafficked victims. And they believe that with legalization, trafficking would reduce, since conditions would improve and conditions would at least be better, safer, healthier due to inspections and patrolmen watching over the legal trafficking areas. And this approach is most commonly known in Amsterdam in the red light district where trafficking is legal. And I visited there, and it's weird. It's a weird phenomenon seeing this demeaning industry just in everyday life. It's the norm. It's almost like window shopping for girls. It's really devastating to see. So while legalization may improve the issue, at least in the forefront, it ultimately won't eliminate it altogether. The traffickers can easily make the place seem healthy and safe. They can still abuse and coerce their slaves as much as they did before, if not more. And women will still feel trapped from the mistreatment, and they'll still hold on to that delusional view that this job is their home since they already acclimated to the sense of shame of selling their bodies for profit, because that's what they feel they need to do to earn profit. I watched a documentary with a prostitute from Amsterdam, as I said, where trafficking is legal, and she says conditions aren't any better than underground or illegal, and girls don't feel any safer, or they don't feel like they have any more freedom than the next girl that's in underground or secretive trafficking. So legalization will ultimately be unsuccessful in decreasing trafficking because it doesn't remove the sense of entrapment that girls feel. Therefore, abuse and maltreatment of women and girls must end. The world, in order to do this, should coalesce and combine resources and ideas to end this tragic business that's ruined an uncandid amount of lives. The most efficient way, as I went over here, is a three-part strategy, and it can counter sexual slavery by stopping trade, saving victims, and ultimately preventing further destruction. So through compassion and determination, the world can win the war on sex trafficking that has destroyed many lives, many nations, and joy in its wake. Thank you.